This is a Real Estate and Open Space Committee meeting, March 17th, 2023. To call the meeting to order. And first of all, any public comment from the audience? Yes, step up, please. Identify yourself.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Patrick Otten, East Harwich. I'm here to talk about a citizen's petition I have online for town meeting, which is the enabling the town of Harwich to have home rule on deciding about fertilizer regulations. So I'm here today to ask you for your support of your committee, or just to get your feedback on that petition. How much detail do you need?
Well, you've spoken before us at
Yes.
the last meeting, so we're kind of pretty well familiar with. Do you have a copy of the petition that we?
I do. I can
haven't
forward
seen.
it to you electronically.
Okay, that would be good. Yeah, but I think we all kind of understand your position on this.
Yeah, right now, Beacon Hill controls application of fertilizers because Cape Cod's in a unique spot. The porous sandy soil, the very limited topsoils, above our drinking aquifer, so everything's porous. Whatever we put on the soil ends up in our aquifer. And the negative effects of fertilizers are endangering our ponds and our seashores. So number one, of course, is our sewering, and that will be resolved with $4 billion over the next 50 years. Fertilizers account for 15% of nitrogen and phosphorus pollution. That's free. If we stop fertilizing, it doesn't cost us anything, and it can be done immediately. The third source of nitrogen and nutrient pollution is simply runoff, which fertilizer also contributes to. So number one is sewering, and town of Harwich is addressing that. Number two is fertilizers, 15%, and that's where I'm at. Why don't we stop fertilizers? It's free, it can be done today, and it will save our ponds from cyanobacteria blooms. It'll save our seashore from loss of shellfish and eelgrass and our other estuaries along our coastline. We're all here because of our water. That's why we live in Harwich. That's why we're on Cape Cod. So my goal is to protect the water. So this proposal says, let the town of Harwich establish their own fertilizer regulations, which, as stated in the petition, is to regulate fertilizers to only commercial agricultural business. They can use whatever fertilizers they need. Homeowners can use only organic fertilizers on their fruits and vegetable gardens. Okay? So that'll be the limitation. Commercial can go ahead and continue their use of fertilizers. Homeowners are only going to be permitted to apply organic fertilizers as certified, okay, as organic, for their fruits and vegetables. So no longer the lawn care application of fertilizers. That's what this petition is asking for.
Okay.
Already, Orleans has passed it, Nantucket has passed it. I'm asking now that the town of Harwich pass it at town meeting this spring.
Okay, thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Questions?
Patrick.
Okay.
Comment, Kathy?
Yeah, so I listened to Patrick speak the other night at the Community Preservation Committee. We asked him some questions. One being that this was to transfer control of, making the regulations, et cetera, from the state to the town.
Right.
And you're saying that within this, it already has some built-in regulations in your proposal.
Yes.
And is that something that, has the town even had a chance to discuss that in a public forum? Because there's gonna be a lot of people, that's gonna open up a Pandora's box for sure.
It does, and it has for Nantucket and Orleans as well. So your suggestion of a public forum or a pre-meeting is a good one.
I'm suggesting that it be discussed because you know, there's a lot involved in it. There's
Yes.
the sort of public versus private and parts of it. There's, you know, sort of the regulatory, you know, portion of it in terms of who establishes the regulations, who's going to enforce the regulations, do we have the funding to do that? I mean, I don't know, I might be off my rocker here, but I just think it's a bigger thing than just trying to go to town meeting and say, I got a citizen's petition, and you take, I mean, I know this is the way it's done. You know, people get emotional about things like that. Oh yeah, we want to save the water, and so they, you know, want to go for something like that without thinking about all the ramifications. And I'm just thinking, shouldn't we have a discussion about all those things first? That's all.
It certainly would be helpful, you know, and not to forget the value of our water as well.
Nobody's questioning the value
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
water.
Yeah, yeah.
I would think there's really two things involved here. One is getting the home rule petition through the, petition the state. That's step one. If that doesn't happen, the rest of the stuff doesn't matter.
Correct.
But I would have questioned whether you'd be better off simply putting in your petition being based strictly on the point of petitioning the state for home rule. And then leave the rest, once you get the home rule, you have all of those meetings and so forth and run it like, you know.
That's why I was
I think
asking
that's
that.
what
I'm
you're getting
concerned
at.
about that because he's.
But I absolutely support both sides, but I think the place to start is get the home rule satisfied first, and then you go for the second part.
And I concur, okay?
Because
It's not-
politically, Kathy's correct, in the
Yep.
sense, it's gonna end up before town meeting, and it's gonna blow up. And you're gonna have a much better chance of saying, look, we're not making any decisions now, we're just trying to get control.
And it may not even pass state legislature. The state may
That's
say,
what I'm
forget
getting
it, Harwich.
Say, look.
Yeah, so I don't
It
know.
allows us to make the decision, not the state make the decision.
You know, I'm before Michael Herman, I'm meeting with him. He's the town selectman in Orleans that brought this forth. So I'm meeting with him this morning and I'll ask that very specific question. So, but as written, it says fertilizers only for commercial use and home gardens and vegetables, okay? That's how it's written today.
Marco?
I agree with Kathy and Dave that I think that it would be smarter to do it in two steps than trying to do it all in one, because what's going to happen at town meeting is people will start debating the merits of the particular approach that you're suggesting, and should commercial be free, and what's the difference between organic fertilizers and non-organic, and I'm not sure you even want to get into that debate unless and until you have the authority to do it. So it seems like, I think you'd have a much better chance of success at town meeting if you went in and said, we'd like to be able to have the authority to make these decisions for our own town,
Right, right.
rather than trying to debate all the ins and outs of what those regulations would be
Yeah,
at
it's
that moment.
complicated. It's complicated.
Yeah.
The pushback on what you're suggesting is who in Harwich will have the authority to decide fertilizer application? And, well, I don't know, you know,
Yeah.
so. And then they say, default, let's go back to Beacon Hill and let them decide. But
Yeah.
Beacon Hill is not us,
Yeah,
you know?
right.
Beacon Hill doesn't have ponds and estuaries.
Right.
so.
Well, I mean, I think it would logically fall either with the Board of Health or the Conservation Commission. I mean, those are the two entities in town that have the expertise to deal with issues like
And the Board
that.
of Health already has, in 2021, put out a regulation on fertilizers that they had to rescind because they don't have home rule ability.
Right.
So, you know, it's a
Yeah.
complicated, twisted story.
Yeah, I think I agree with what's been said, and the thing is, if you don't separate that out at town meeting, there's gonna be a lot of time spent on, well, who's gonna know whether I do what on my own property, and how are you gonna regulate it, how are you gonna, so that's gonna maybe throw everything out. So it's better just to go with the one thing
Yeah, okay.
and get that through, and then start with the educational process, and
Yeah.
more education to people on how to do things and the reason why they should.
Yes.
So
that's a-
that you can build up in time so that the next time you go before them, you maybe have that
All
one.
right, all
Okay?
right, no.
Thank you very
No,
much,
I
Patrick.
certainly appreciate all of your input and support, so I need help, obviously, so, no, thank you.
Elaine,
Oh, you're welcome.
Amy had her hand up.
Amy?
Amy Usowski, Conservation Administrator. I just wanted to let this committee know that Conservation Commission did hear the request the other night, and pretty much agreed with what you're saying. They agree that they would like the town of Harwich to, that it's a good idea to ask the state legislature to be able to have home rule here for us to decide what regulations to have in regards to fertilizer. So they took it the same way that you're saying. Step one, petition to say, can the town even, can we have this? And then take a little time and decide what that would look like. And just so this body knows, there is a group in this town pretty much composed of conservation, health, and Sean Fernandez over at the golf course, who are working on draft, educational materials and guidance for homeowners about, what other plant materials can you use, what are better practices, things like this, to try to start the conversation and start people going along a better route than what they're doing right now.
Thank you, Amy.
Elaine?
Yes, Kathy?
The other thing is, I think that a regional approach is maybe a better way, because, I'm fortunate enough to live by Pleasant Bay, and I'm looking out at Eastwood Ho, and and the green lawns. And you just say to yourself, okay, well, how do we approach this? How do we make this better for everybody? But everybody has to be involved. And I know it's been discussed before and that kind of thing. This is nothing new, but I do think a regionalized kind of thing. And I'm surprised that, wastewater is not sort of part of this, since it's kind of a package thing.
Wastewater absolutely is part of this because DEP will give us credits for sewering based on our fertilizer application.
Okay.
So we'll get credits if we
Okay.
limit our fertilizers, okay?
Michael?
Yes, thank you. Kathy, I think you nailed it. I'm speaking under no official capacity whatsoever. This has been taken up several times, and I would ask all of you to reach out to our water superintendent. He's done a tremendous amount of work on this, and this was heard by the Board of Selectmen. Patrick first, Mr. Otten first approached us to try and get us to go to the legislator. It was voted down 5-0 from the Board of Selectmen. After the presentation from our golf superintendent and our water wastewater, and a lot of landscapers in town that are licensed to apply. There's a lot of inaccuracies in Patrick's petition article and in his talk to different boards. And I would ask that the committee look at the actual information, but the number is not 15%, and Dan Pelletier can explain why it's not 15%. Orleans and Nantucket haven't passed. They passed the town side. They have not passed the legislature yet. Another important piece for Mr. Otten to consider would be to look at waiting for the legislature to decide if they're going to even pass it. Just because it passes town meeting does not mean it passes. So there are 2 test cases out there, but neither have passed.
Thank you.
But there is an awful lot of information out there. And then for future, just as a point of order, if we're going to get into this level of debate, we should have an agenda item and items in it, so anyone from the public can come and dispute what a speaker might say.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. Anything else? We good? All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Patrick.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, quickly, to welcome our guest, Mr. McCaskill, Chair of the Board of Selectmen, Mr. Paul Halkiotis, Director of Planning and Community Development, Amy Osowski, Conservation Administrator. Dan Pelletier is unable to join us this morning. But I think we can still go over quite a few things that he had planned to talk to us about. Motion to approve the minutes from a regular session of February 17th, 2023.
So moved.
And second,
Second?
all in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. I'm not going to get into a chair's report. I think we just need to move on to executive session. So we take a motion to
Move into executive session.
session and not return to
Regular
regular
session.
session.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
roll call.
Aye, Kathy Green, aye.
Margot Fenn, aye.
Dave Callahan, aye.
Elaine Shovelin, aye. We are now in executive session.